Hello, everyone. So today we have Keone Chong. I'm sorry, did I say that right? I always mess up the
Keone.
pronunciations. Keone, all right. So today we
Got it.
have Keone Chong here on the Soul's Conquest, the second season. He's an amazing creator, but I will let him tell you more about himself. First of all, thank you so much for coming here. How has your day been and stuff like
It's been really great.
that?
Really productive.
Yeah,
Kind of preparing to step into May, as we shared earlier.
yeah.
Lots of really strange energies in the air. But really staying grounded and focused and continuing to build, keep the momentum.
Yes, that's really important. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself because I want to have like the spotlight on you. This is your time to shine. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you. I don't know, where can I start? Let's start here. I usually like to start with this. I am a Caribbean, Asian, African American, first generation. I live in Los Angeles, and I come from a very unique background. My family is Jamaican. My mother is of African descent, and my father is of Asian descent. And so, growing up and looking at the world and being raised in America, I had a very counter-cultural upbringing, which I think leads me to have a very unique perspective on just social and community and technology and all of the really interesting evolutions that's happening in our society in this day and age.
that sounds amazing. I love that. I love that it was so personal. Thank you for sharing that. My
Mhm.
next question for you is, can you share a little bit about your craft? Like, what do you create as a creator?
Yeah. I consider myself a creative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely an artist. Um, but my skill set or my superpower is synthesis. It's brand strategy. It's the ability to really bring together very disparate, and unique ideas together in and weave them into like a symphony of messaging, into a symphony of value, into really unique experiences, and helping tie those experiences with business goals. I look at branding as the matching between culture and commerce,
Mm-hmm.
finding a way for both sides of that equation to grow harmoniously and in authenticity.
Wow, that's amazing. Why do you create brands in particular, right? Like, why? What's the fascination with it?
That's a really great question. And my fascination with brands really started with my fascination with self,
Mm-hmm.
to really come into my own self identity. And so, I shared a little bit earlier the really unique aspects of my heritage and my upbringing,
Yeah.
and that really started this search for me in my early 20s for identity and for me to understand who I am. Like understanding, okay, I am Jamaican, and I get that. And I understand that I am of African descent and I am of Asian descent. My father is Cantonese, and so I'm very familiar, with the Cantonese culture and Kowloon Bay, and all the places where we've come from, and the rituals within our culture. um, but what I really wanted to understand was, like, what does this mean for me? How does
Mm-hmm.
this really define who I am, and how can I take ownership of that in a culture that is so materialistic, right?
Right.
That requires this compulsive definition of identity through products,
Right.
uh,
I
and
love that.
yeah, it's really the world that we live in, and it was very confusing for me to make sense for myself. Being Caribbean, you have very different values than African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this rift that I always experience between many of, my African American peers and myself. And I couldn't place it. I couldn't make sense of it. But as I grew older, I started to really understand that it was opposing values at time that really set us apart. And that's what made it difficult for us to communicate at that cultural level.
Yeah.
But in that search for that, sense of self and my identity, I really started to understand culture. I really started to understand identity, and I started to see how that related to branding, how that related to building businesses. um, and so in my life, my career path started in engineering, and then it moved into anthropology and journalism, and then from journalism it moved into entrepreneurship and business.
That's
So technology, I'm sorry.
now, as I was saying, that's like a crazy process, and I love it. I love that journey. But yeah, please
it,
continue.
it, yeah, it's really unique, and it gives me really interesting perspectives, that are very polarizing in this day and age. A lot of typical advertisers and branders, business developers, we have very conflicting views in the world and how to pursue the building of businesses,
Hmm.
because of my experience and because of my unique background. um, but I revel in it and I own it. I really
Yeah,
feel like I'm ahead of the curve.
yeah, you definitely are with all the stuff that you put out, with the design therapy and stuff like that. That's like a whole other thing. But I have loved the journeys that you have shared over there and the journey that you have shared with me right now. Um, you've answered this question a bit in the previous answers, but if it is not too personal to ask, why is it so important for you to find out who you are as a person, and where exactly, if you can pinpoint, did that search start?
Um, oh, got my printer going off. All right, and it stopped. Okay, so then let's continue. I didn't want to have that background noise while I was talking.
Yes.
So let's dive into it. So the question, and it's what I'm hearing um, is it about identity? Like, why is it so important to know who you are,
Yeah.
and how to start that journey?
Yeah.
Is
How
that
did you start that journey? Like,
how
if
did I
it's not,
start that
yeah.
journey?
Yeah.
So here's why I think it's important. I think it's important because I think leadership and creativity are going to be I believe, the two most important skill sets for the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And effective leadership starts with a sense of identity and a sense of self.
Right.
In the Academically speaking, in the psychological field in America, they have this concept of identity being a thing that is achieved, meaning
Mhm.
like you actually have to go through trials and tribulations to
Yeah.
understand who your identity is. And I believe in understanding your true identity, you are really anchored into your values. And that allows for you to make decisions based on values as opposed to profit or fame or ego or any of these other
Mhm.
narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And so when you can really enter into your values and make decisions around your values, that allows for you to build, really authentic communities.
Right.
And, values will always lead a community.
Right.
So that's why I think it's so important, particularly in the space of design. And I learned a lot of leadership lately from creatives. And I believe that creatives bring the probably most powerful kind of leadership that there is possible, because you start with an empathy, you start
Mhm.
with an understanding,
Yeah.
and it's a human understanding and expression that you start leadership with. um, now uh, Now, where does this journey start? um, that's a great question, and it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
For me, my journey really started in my mid 20s.
Right.
But I know I have peers that from a very, very young age, had really understood leadership and have been able to quickly accelerate in roles of leadership. There are some early 20-year-old, mid 20-year-old, executives at Facebook that are leading design, that are leading social, particularly in the marketing space. There are tons of really powerful young creatives and influencers that are really exciting. So when I think about where the path of leadership begins, I think it's less about how old you are, and I think it's more about the mindset about committing to really understanding who you are, to really processing your trauma and your
Hmm.
pain,
Yeah.
because I believe a lot of uh, your values and insights come from those experiences more than any other experience.
Yeah.
And and then it's a lifelong journey. It's this thing that you're always going to be on. It's not
Mhm.
like you wake up one day and you're like, all right, I'm going to be a leader, let's go.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
It's an arduous path, and true leaders are chosen.
Right.
They don't just say, I'm going to be the leader.
Hmm.
Individuals reach out to them and say, hey, we respect your leadership skills, and we would like for you to lead us into this new space, into this uncharted territory,
Yeah.
into the future.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, there was one thing that really struck with me, and I wanted to ask you. So, you say that creatives are better suited to be good leaders. Um, and you spoke about values. So, I wanted to ask you, as a creative, how much do personal values and business values overlap while you are in a leadership position?
So the best leaders, those values are already in alignment,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's why founders, and we see this time and time again. Founders will really lead a company through its early growth phases, but as the founder, maybe matures or moves into other aspects of their life,
Mm-hmm.
the business, tends to shift dramatically.
Yeah.
We've seen that with Apple and Steve Jobs. We've seen that with Bill Gates.
Mm-hmm.
We see that constantly. And really what that's about is that's because generally speaking, the founder, the one that's really driving the vision,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the people and the culture and really setting the tone, their values are in alignment with the brand.
Right.
Um, right. When you have leaders whose personal values are out of alignment with the brand, uh, that's when you start to have challenges. And this is why uh, in brands and culture, there's this thing called Dunbar's number, which is
Mm-hmm.
100. It's approximately 150, and that means that uh, we, as an individual, can have approximately 150 deep relationships.
Right.
Anything beyond that, things break. It's hard to scale.
Mm-hmm.
Either one side looks at the relationship as disingenuous, or the other side looks at the relationship as uncommitted. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
opportunities for miscommunication,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just because we can't scale deep relationships. Now, in businesses, generally speaking, healthy businesses, on average, I think in the United States, it's like 250 employees
Yeah.
for a mid-sized company.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that means that one leader cannot have 150 deep relationships within the company.
Yeah.
What it means is that they have to entrust other individuals to lead. And so, if you're a founder and your values are aligned with your company, but then you hire somebody whose values are not aligned with the company, what you start to create is a dissonance, right? Now you're starting to see gaps in the way that rituals are expressed, the way that people feel about the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, uh, Sentiment drops, motivation drops, right? These are the things that happen when there's lack of alignment within the values. And so it's super, super key when you are growing a company, when you're growing a startup, when you're growing a team,
Mm-hmm.
that you focus on the cultural values first.
Yeah.
Skills, when we're entering into an age where we're going to be reskilling ourselves every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fact of the workplace, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but what will not be reskilled is values.
Yeah.
Who we are is always going to be who we are, and so
Right.
we really need to be able to focus on making sure that uh, who we are, that allows for us to be the best that we can be, are
Mm-hmm.
the same values that you keep within the culture of your brands and the culture of your businesses.
Yeah, that's amazing. As a creative, how would you be able to kind of build a community where the values are aligned, um, with your personal values, your brand values, as well as the values of the people who are in your community? If that made any sense, would you like me to rephrase that?
Yeah, so let me see if I understand the question. You're saying, how do you build alignment in values between, your community, your employees, your
Mm-hmm.
owners of the company,
Yeah.
fans of the company?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, So the answer to that, in my eyes, is um, our rituals of expression.
Yeah.
It is the ability to uh, take a value and to express it in an authentic way, and to be able to share that expression
Mm-hmm.
with everyone within the community, and allow for the community to then take that expression and remix it.
Yeah.
Um, how, like, what does that look like? So what does that look like? That looks like, what is great examples? Food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we see time and time again. Here's a great example: when your grandmother teaches you a recipe, and then the
Mm-hmm.
grandmother passes it to the mother, and the mother learns the
Yeah.
recipe, and then the mother then teaches it to her daughter, and then the daughter then learns the recipe, and then
Yeah.
that daughter teaches it to her daughter, or her son, or her father. Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing: that recipe evolves
Yeah.
slightly with
Yeah.
everybody who does it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the grandmother has her interpretation, and then when she hands it on off to her daughter
Mm-hmm.
or son, right? It doesn't really matter, or they or them.
Yes.
Um, they interpret it and they learn it, and then now it is their expression. And so the values of that gets translated down and down and down the line. Um, that's a very like micro example of it,
Yeah.
but it can happen on a macro scale as well.
For sure.
Memes are a great example,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Someone interprets a feeling and an idea, and then takes it and then puts it out in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody looks at that scene and references that scene in
Mm-hmm.
real life to actual experiences that they have.
Yeah.
You know, I think memes are so unique in that it's more than the expression of an idea. It's
Mm-hmm.
also an expression of a feeling. It's
Right.
also an expression of a perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and they're really great because they're applicable in so many different ways. So yeah, memes is a great way of that, how that's happening at scale. Language.
Mm-hmm.
There's this big uproar right now about the N-word in
Mm-hmm.
America, and
Yeah.
how creatives use it, and
Mm-hmm.
how individuals who have always used it as a tool of oppression, and how they continue to use it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
uh, Culture has this remarkable thing where is ever uh, nothing is ever static in culture.
Mm-hmm.
An idea or a meaning always evolves.
Right.
So, a horrible word, which has been traditionally used to dehumanize a community,
Mm-hmm.
that community was ingenuitive enough, was innovative enough to take that and say, you know what, we're going to create something completely different out of this,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
they can run and they can use it, right? Now, the big challenge within the community and the people around language, well, language is always this fluid thing.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the definition that it began as is never the definition that it ends up as, right?
Yes.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a fact.
Mm-hmm.
But what is really interesting is the perspectives under which, right? The perspectives confound individuals.
Yeah.
There are African Americans
Mm-hmm.
who detest the word. They say this word is horrible. We should never use the word.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of things, you have African Americans who say, I love this word. They
Yes.
tried to use it as a tool of hate, and now I use it as a tool of love. So
Yeah.
stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like Caucasians who have traditionally used the word in a negative way and want to continue to use the word, but
Mm-hmm.
then they turn around and then their sons and daughters are singing and rapping the latest hip hop songs and calling each other those words, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's this incredible cycle of it's confusion,
Mm-hmm.
but what it is it's evolution,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's we're sitting here and we're stuck in like this. We're stuck in between two phases of an evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 100 years, how is that word going to look? That
Wow.
is that is the real question, right?
That's a
Um,
real question.
and and I'm sure that you deal with it too in your community
Mm-hmm.
because of the colorism, right?
Yeah.
Um, we both come from developing nations, and
Yeah.
so you know there's that there's that element of colonialism that always
Yeah.
said that
Oh yeah.
lighter that you are, the more
Yep.
Caucasian that you are, that the better that you are, the more
Yeah.
socially acceptable you are.
Yeah.
Um, like in some parts of China, for example, there's the Obama shade, right?
Right.
Which is this crazy thing that I just learned
Wow.
in this documentary that I was watching,
Yeah.
about the African diaspora in China and
Hmm.
being of African descent and growing up and living in China and the kinds of experiences that you have. In it, they reference how, like if you're darker skinned, you definitely deal with more of a pushback than if you're lighter skinned.
Yeah.
Um, this is something that is happened close to home, but there's also like this idea on how you can express yourself.
Yep.
Like I have light hair, it's
Yeah.
blonde in some parts, right? And there's some people who are like, well, you can't be a revolutionary,
Hmm.
you can't fight for the power because you have blonde hair and you've
Right.
dyed your hair. And you're like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Does this mean that I can't express myself as I choose
Mhm.
to express myself outside of any kind of, idea of what it means to
Yeah.
be black or white or just human? Like,
Yeah.
my creativity should afford me the ability to express myself in however I want to express myself.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to chase after an ethnicity or any of these other things. I'm trying to express a creative idea that I have, right?
Yeah.
Why can't it just be a creative idea? Why does it have to sit in alignment with, oh, you might be trying to be white? Or would you even think about Caucasians in the expression of my creativity?
Right.
Right?
Oh my God. Yeah. I love this.
Yeah, it's a really nuanced conversation about
Mhm.
creativity,
Mhm.
and your ability to be yourself.
Yeah.
And this all circles back to the original idea that we had when we talked about, identity and what it means to be yourself and
Yeah.
how to be rooted in your values.
Hmm.
Uh, Society is always going to be like this shifting ocean of
Oh yeah.
ideas and values and opportunities, good and bad, right? It's
Yeah.
always going to be out there. But the challenge is, how do you navigate that world? And you navigate that world through your values,
Wow.
right? Like if you come to a place and you're like, do I go right or left? Well, look at your values. What do your values tell you,
Yeah.
right? Are you prioritizing people or are you prioritizing profit? If you're prioritizing profit, then you're probably easily going to go in one direction.
Right.
But if you're prioritizing people in your community, you're going to shift in another direction.
Hmm. I love that. I love that was the best answer I could have ever hoped for. It was like 100 times better than what I could have hoped for. Um, Amazing. That was genuinely so amazing because it made me relate to a lot of things that you were saying, right? Like the fairness of the skin and stuff like that, because that's super important when you're getting married in India. That, oh my God, how fair are you? And I'm like, nah, man, I like it. I like myself as who I am. But then people go here like, you'll never get married. I'm like, if people are looking at the color of my skin to marry me, it's probably good that I'm not going to get married. Like,
Absolutely.
that's not like, this is just, oh my God, this is just like pigmentation is just melatonin and stuff like that. Like, what's that got to do with you being a person and what kind of a person you are? I think that's like a whole another topic, and we could like talk about this for like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
totally. Colorism is a big thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
I have friends in Nigeria that are dealing with it. I have friends in Jamaica that are dealing with it. I have
Okay.
friends in 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 not India, but in right next to India. Why does the name escape me? Um, Begins with a P. Why can't I think of
Philippines.
the name? I'm sorry,
Philippines.
Pakistan. Pakistan.
Pakistan. Right. Right.
Yes, yes. I have a friend from Pakistan, and his conversations with his aunts, and like understanding, like, so his mother was a comes from a very well-to-do family.
Mm-hmm.
She's has the correct family name.
Yeah.
His father was a general in the army.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I remember being very young and hanging out with him and his cousins and stuff. And, like
Yeah.
Pakistani women are quite attractive, and we've had these conversations. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, a very early conversation I had. And I've been friends, with Remy since what? Since 6th grade now. So,
Right.
I must have been 16 or 15 having these
Yeah.
conversations. And she's like, well, one of the women, we were hanging out at the mosque,
Yeah.
and sneaking from prayers and going to play basketball and all the things, and talking
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
talking to all the girls in the mosque. And
Yeah.
she, like we had this full on conversation, and she said, she's like, I don't get involved with anyone that I'm not going to marry.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, I mean, we're 15 years old and she's
Yeah.
already talking about marriage.
Yeah.
But her response was, but you have beautiful skin. And, I know that my mother would like your skin color. And I
Yeah.
remember like hearing that for the first time and being like, really like, what is that? I have really
Guadalupe.
nice skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what I didn't understand it at the time,
Yeah.
until I got older. And
Hmm.
he's like, look, foreigners don't, foreigners struggle. But
Yeah.
you can bring a really dynamic because you're so light skinned.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I think. I couldn't make sense of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, colorism is, really in colorism really is just colonialism.
Yeah.
Let's
I
call it
agree.
what it is. It's colonialism.
Hmm. Wow. Whew. That was an exciting topic. I can genuinely have like an hour long, maybe more longer conversations about it. But I kind of want to circle back to your creative journey. You did share
Hmm.
bits and pieces about that, but would you like to kind of dive deeper into that? Your journey as a creative. What was the first thing
Sure.
that
Let's
made you go like, damn, maybe I want to create stuff?
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
Yes.
Um, when I came to understand that I was an artist,
Hmm.
it happened in 4th grade. I'd always drawn. My father's very good with his hands. My father's a handyman. We built cars together. We built crazy, humongous subwoofers. We built houses. Plumbing, electrical, like you name it, we've done it.
Oh,
And it's a very Jamaican thing. Like you learn all the skills to do all the things that you need to do to take care of your house, your car, your family, your electronics.
yeah.
He hated that I was that I became an Apple aficionado, because he always told me like, Keone, if you can't take it apart and you can't fix it, you don't own it, right?
Yeah.
Those were the rules. And as Apple is very, like um anti self fix.
Mm-hmm.
uh but growing up, I my parents got divorced at a very young age. I was in 4th grade at the time when the divorce proceedings began. And I really struggled to fit in. I struggled on a cultural level. I didn't really fit into everyone that I was with. I went to a school that was very affluent. So most of the students there were Caucasian or Asian. And they looked at me, they'd see my last name is Chong, and they'd be like, you're not Chinese. I mean, you're Chinese, but you're not Chinese.
Yeah.
African Americans looked at me and was like, you're black, but you're not black. You talk different. You're into a lot of different things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was always in this weird place where I was what I call third cultured, right? You're American, but you're not really of America. So it's hard for you to connect and find those values. At the time, I was a very mischievous young boy, and my teacher at the time, Mrs. Castellano, who was incredible, Marie Castellano. If she ever comes across this podcast, look me up. I would love for us to connect and just chat.
Yay.
You were instrumental in my life. And what she would do is she would give me these art projects. And so, like in class, because I was, very, very ahead of the curve, I would do the work, I'd be bored. And so instead of me distracting the class, she would give me these art projects. Over time, she collected these art projects and made this whole gallery for open house, which is when parents can come to the school and see what's going on. What was really interesting is each of these art projects were actually there were art competitions, and so she was going out and finding art competitions, taking my work and entering them into these art competitions, and I started winning.
Okay.
And my mother, there was a local, excuse me, there was a local artist that was at the school and had seen the gallery of artwork and was like, who had done this? The teacher informed him that it was me, and he was really excited. He's like, I'd love to have you come down to my studio and like see how a professional, artist operates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget it. My mother looked at him and she's like, art doesn't make money,
Yeah.
right? He's going to have a real career, doctor, lawyer, engineer,
Damn.
right?
Yeah.
And from that point, I thought that engineering was the way. I was really good at mathematics and the hard sciences and
Mm-hmm.
electronics. I wanted to get into robotics. I was like, okay, so I guess robotics is going to be my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And went to Caltech, then went to Cal Poly Pomona. Um, and at some point at Cal Poly Pomona, I got to a point where I was like, this isn't what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a class, and we were talking about heat transfer systems. It was basically how heat in a machine can rob the efficiency of a machine.
Right.
So if this machine, this engine is operating at 95 degrees Celsius, what how does that impact, the efficiency of the engine as a whole? Ridiculous question.
Mm-hmm.
Did the final, or I did the was it the final? I think it was the midterm. I think of the midterm, it was when I decided like this wasn't what I wanted to do anymore.
Yeah.
um, and had a huge shift and pivoted. I pivoted to culture because it was something that was interesting to me at the time. I had just taken an anthropology class, and I had a couple professors that really shifted my perspective on identity and who I was.
Yeah.
And um, my brother opened up a famous website at the time. It was called Nerd of Swag, number one black owned tech blog in the world, really built on our lifestyle. So growing up, we were online very early on because my father had a computer repair store. So we were online on forums in, the mid 90s, early on.
Yeah.
We watched the web, web 2.0. We watched, the .com bust. Like we lived it. We were like digital natives at the time.
Yeah.
uh, that experience with my father, and having that access to technology, and then our unique cultural perspectives is what really built that website. I joined my brother and supported him on it. And that led to my career in journalism. From there, I went to work at LA Times. I was an on-air correspondent for CTV,
Mm-hmm.
covering technology and cars and the latest cool shit that was out there. Ooh, I'm not supposed to cuss. And cover cool things that were out there,
Yeah.
in the world. And that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But what that taught me is it taught me the power of messaging and advertising. And it taught me that what I needed to do was actually to get behind the curtain.
Right.
What I wanted to learn was how to actually build the brands.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I put my career on hold.
Mm-hmm.
My mother wanted to open up a restaurant, so I stepped in as the GM and opened up a restaurant, a Jamaican restaurant in Pasadena.
Nice.
Grew it up, to a couple 100,000 a year. I had a marketing stunt, and I got it on Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmare. Like
Whoa.
did the whole nine, yeah,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. It's definitely uh, one of my heartfelt experiences in entrepreneurship because I went through the whole gamut. Um,
Yeah.
I built it to success, and then I ultimately failed in leadership because I couldn't find a way to 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 collaborate with the financier, the owner of the company.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I didn't have the skill set at the time to be able to do. The exercises to be able to execute it, the frameworks and the mindsets to keep it in sustainable growth. All that to say, uh, I left that business and then I went and worked at Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Apple validated a lot of my business principles, it validated a lot of my creative, a lot of my UX and UI, advertising ideas, killed it, did my thing at Apple. And it's where I met my first mentor, my first real mentor in my creative career, Tom Cordner, who at the time was Dean of Advertising at Art Center.
Right.
And we had great conversations. We would constantly talk about the market and what I thought. And then one day he just challenged me. He's like, you need to go out, you need to build something, you need to do something for yourself.
Yeah.
So I jumped. I left Apple. I partnered up with two friends. We launched an agency.
Oh.
That agency grew into another agency, grew that agency. That agency grew into another agency. Did that agency for a while, consulted, worked with a lot of big companies, worked with a lot of startups,
Mm-hmm.
um, and ultimately landed me to where I'm at today now, building the system with my founders, Jose and Mary.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
that. That was an amazing journey. Um, I think it was really powerful to hear you say that, and it was really powerful for a very specific reason for me, specifically. And I think this will be relating, like people listening to this can relate to this really well, is the fact
Mhm.
that you were not afraid to change or shift gears when you felt like something was not in alignment to what you want to achieve in your life. And that's something that's so powerful, and that's something that's super scary. But you did it, right? Like, you shifted gears multiple times throughout your journey till you reached this place. You were challenged, and you kind of stood up to that challenge, and you powered through, and that was super amazing to hear. uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's really important to highlight. And this is why,
Mm-hmm.
in our life, we can do so many things. Just because you have a skill doesn't mean that that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to be rooted in your talent.
Mm-hmm.
And your talent is a skill that you're good at, but it's also energizing, and it refreshes you. And, you could do it at all times of the day,
Yeah.
in any circumstance. And for the most part, it'll be fun. Yeah, there'll be times where you'll be like, oh, and you're going to have to, drog through it.
Yeah.
But you can do it for the most part.
Yeah.
That's really where we should be at. That's where you should be focusing your efforts.
Mm-hmm.
But to discover that and to find that, it takes time. It's not going to just be handed to you.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to go through series of jobs to understand, like, do I like this thing? We'll try it for a couple of years. Oh, I tried it for a couple of years. I didn't like it. Okay. But you may have learned something from it. Yes, I learned that I like to do these kind of processes. Okay. So align that with your skill set and then use that in your next gig, right? This is the process that you have. You actually have to evolve through
Mm-hmm.
the work that you do to find the thing that really resonates with you, that brings you joy.
Yeah.
uh, and it's not going to be handed to you.
Yeah.
You have to find it in life. You have to get out there, try the different gigs.
Mm-hmm.
As Jose calls it, he calls it Jack Sparrowing it,
Yeah.
and Pirates of the Caribbean. It's
Yeah.
like, how does he always make the mistake that was the right decision?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is simple. It's because the criteria that he's using to make his decisions are based on his values.
Right.
They're based on who he is
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, right? So if you always stay true to your values, like for me, like I knew that I wanted to build brands, but really didn't even know how to articulate that at
Yeah.
the time. And
Yeah.
so when I look back at my creative career, I started with journalism. I started like with the mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I dabbled in social media. I liked it a little bit, didn't really like it a little bit, but I learned a lot. Um, did art shows, liked it a little bit. Actually liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Really started to learn about the community in art and design. Got involved in the music scene, really loved that. Really understood that I wanted to work with creatives, wanted to work with founders, started working in the entrepreneurship space. That was really great. Worked at LA Times, like, no, I don't want to be sitting here writing articles all day. But I learned a lot of skills, and it taught me a little bit about research and
Right.
how to execute at a very high level. You take that on to the next gig, and it just snowballs, and you just try all of these different kinds of jobs until you get to a point where you're like, oh, you know what, this is what's really great for me, this is what I
Yeah.
truly love, this
Yeah.
is what makes me
Yeah. And that feels amazing, right? Like, when everything kind of falls into place, and you're like, this is it. That's amazing. I want to ask you, what
happy.
do you
Yes.
hope to achieve before starting a new project, or before starting working on a new brand?
What do I hope to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about what I'm hoping to achieve now in my current space with this company, with the
No,
work
like,
that we're doing?
whenever you start a new project, a new creative project, let it be brands or whatever it is that you're working on at the moment. What do you as a person, as a creative, hope to achieve when you start a new project?
Mm. So the way that I'm reading that question is outside of the project parameters, outside of what the project actually has, right?
Yeah.
So I might be taking on a rebrand project and I'm just designing packaging for them.
Yeah.
That's the work. But what am I looking for it from a personal standpoint?
Yes, that's right.
Um, it depends. For up until recently, up until the last year, uh, all of the projects that I took on, I really wanted to take away some sort of understanding
Mm-hmm.
and some deeper like familiarity with the space. Like here's an example. I've done a bunch of cannabis projects.
Mm-hmm.
I've done cannabis branding. I've helped, launch a cannabis distribution company. I've done product development. I've designed my own cannabis products. Like I've gone through just about every aspect of in cannabis production. Um, and I wanted to do that because I wanted A, I love emerging markets. B, I think there's huge opportunity for our community,
Mm-hmm.
in that space. And I love the challenges of emerging markets, to see where the opportunities lie, to
Yeah.
see how you build businesses at this scale, to
Mm-hmm.
see where you can really create companies that can impact communities, that can drive culture and be profitable.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm always trying to learn how to do those things with every project. But I think depending on like where the project is, it changes like my expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Here's an example. I had a project where I worked on it with a very famous film producer who's African American.
Mm-hmm.
And the project that I worked on with him, I had a lot of promise. Uh, my personal investment in the project was I thought that this could be a tool for our community, and really, create new opportunities in this work from home, uh, economy that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, the pandemic is going to be ending, probably within the next year and a half. Americans are definitely leading the charge with vaccinations, but for example, India is on the other side of that threshold, and India needs a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
So the world as a whole has a long way to go before this pandemic is going to be eased, before the restrictions are going to be eased. And
Mm-hmm.
as a result, that means that we need to really be careful about, um, the ability to work in a decentralized way.
Yeah.
Uh, so this was a platform that I thought could really supercharge that effort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and then I think just to answer the question just in general is that uh out of the work that I want to do, um I really want to shift the culture of design. I want to shift it to becoming more inclusive,
Yeah.
to becoming uh to becoming, like what's the word, an adjective for leadership.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately for it to create better opportunities for those of us that have been disenfranchised,
Yeah.
for those of us that are darker, for
Yeah.
those of us that have suffered under like colonial imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for us to step out and start creating our own legacies as cultural creatives.
Wow, that's beautiful. What do you hope people who are viewing, you know, your project will feel like post the completion of the project? Um, so like, what is the one thing that you aim for that the people will react to or will feel like when they view your project, any project that you're working on?
You know, Good question. And I think it really actually falls down to how strong of the strategic execution it is.
Right.
I think for me, like I always focus on really high fidelity strategic execution, meaning that the work that gets executed has deep resonance within the community, within the customers,
Right.
right? When a customer can look at it and be like, "Ooh, yes, that speaks to me," right? That's what I'm trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
I think the goal for me is in all the projects that I work on is for me to be able to create a space where the customer feels safe, where their values are, are in alignment, and they can empathize with the messaging, the product, the service, whatever it is. They can really feel it, and that's the goal.
Why is it important for you that people feel that connectivity, that that relation, the feeling of being like, oh my god, this speaks to me? Why is it important for you?
Because I like to build authentic cultural communities,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, we were that. I like to build authentic communities um, that are built on their cultural values.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that when I do work, I don't want to seem like an outsider. I don't want to seem like someone that's coming in that's just making something or making a project just to make money.
Yeah.
That's not the case. When I take on a project, I really want to help the community, the audience, the employees, the founders, the executives,
Mm-hmm.
from the root to the tooth. Like I want for all of these elements to be in alignment, and for there to be deep empathy, that there's a resonance. To me, that is the hallmarks of really powerful branding. And that's really the kind of impact that I desire to create through my work.
That's beautiful. You have shared your journey. I want to ask you, have you ever faced any obstacles during your journey as a creator?
Yeah, totally. And I think I faced all the typical ones that we all talk about: self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
um you know I struggle to value myself. um at times, constantly, I have to always remind myself that I am valuable, that I am expensive, that I do need to charge this amount. um the challenge of managing time,
Mm-hmm.
and output, managing energies, super super important, managing relationships.
Mm-hmm.
you know I don't know how many girlfriends I've had that are like, look, if you don't take a real job, I'm gonna leave. Or
Yeah.
girlfriends like, like you're not working, you're not taking enough pay for this, Keone.
Mhm.
And like all of those things, are huge. Relationships and dating as an entrepreneur is a huge thing. That's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Um, Acceptance by family and parents. My
Yeah.
mother is like, "Oh, you could have been an engineer and this, that, and the other."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, I could have, and I could have also been extremely unhappy doing that work as an engineer."
Yeah.
Uh, right? These are all the typical challenges that we deal with being a creative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I go through them. I'm no special than anyone else out there.
Mm-hmm.
I have to constantly remind myself that you're valuable, that you're powerful, that you're creative, that um, that you have a purpose here,
Yeah.
on this earthly plane, and it's your mission, to come hell or high water,
Yeah.
to deliver that message to the world, to the community, to the culture, to shift it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That's beautiful. What were some of the solutions that you came to kind of fight or deal with these obstacles that you faced?
The big thing is having a community,
Mm-hmm.
having a family.
Yeah.
And when I talk about family, I'm not talking about the family that you're born with. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the family that chooses you.
Yes.
And so these are the friends that are in your life that, remind you to continue to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
and are pumped to see your creative practice. These are the friends that you have that, will buy your product and service at full price and say, no, I'm paying full price. You're going to take my money. You going to take my money.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
These are the ones that, when you're in a place of, when you're creatively lost and you're in a rut, that they reach out to you and they say, hey, I was just thinking about you, and I just want to remind you, how powerful a creative that you are, and
Yes.
how impactful, your thinking is, and how much I respect you for your values.
Yes.
You need to have those people in your life.
Yeah.
You need to have that community. We as humans, we're social beings, and our strength really comes from the ability to be social and to lean on each other, and to support each other in times of need.
Wow. That was beautiful. I love that a lot. Now, as this is a spiritual podcast, I think it would be awesome to know if you have like any self care or spiritual routines that you follow, not only in your daily life, but also when you're working on a specific project or any project in general.
Mm. Yes. So I'm big on self-care.
Yes.
Jose will tell you I have like a 9-step skin routine that I use
Nice.
constantly. Like it's part of the things that I do for self-care.
Hmm.
Sports is super, super important. Like I come from an athletic family. My mother is an Olympian. So
Wow.
um if I go for like a week, it's been about a week actually since I've worked out. I need to get a workout in tonight.
Yeah.
But if I don't work out on a regular basis, ideally for me daily, then it really affects me and my mindset and my, the way that I see the world and myself.
Hmm.
Um, Spiritual practices, meditation is key, key,
Right.
key, key. Meditation is super important.
Hmm.
I do journaling just about every morning. I journal and I write to myself,
Hmm.
and I collect my thoughts. And the exercise that I'm doing this year is to take down my journal entry for the morning and then project where I'm at in a year.
Right.
Like, where am I at in what does the world look like? What did these feelings or concerns or fears or insecurities that I'm dealing with today, how do they get resolved in the future?
Hmm.
Um, that's an exercise that I do.
Well.
The creative practice of creating,
Hmm.
right? Art, design is one thing, to do design for a client or to do design for someone
Yeah.
that's paying you, that you're getting compensation for as you're building your career. That's one thing. But
Hmm.
art is creation for no one else but yourself, for your own vision. So
Yeah.
I think that's super duper important and necessary. Um, let's see what else. And I think if anything else, it would probably be uh testimony, and this
Hmm.
is like finding someone that in your community
Yeah.
that's maybe at the same level that you are, that you can provide help with, and provide help for them,
Yes.
mentor somebody. They
Hmm.
can be young creative,
Yeah.
they're just getting in the field and they don't know, they don't know uh
Yeah.
color palettes, they don't know mood boards from stylescapes, from culturescapes, who knows?
Yeah.
But they need the support and they need the help. Reach out to them, build those relationships,
Yes.
tap into the youth.
Mhm.
uh, it's the most important thing that we can do. My dad told me that the most important job that there is on this planet is to educate, to be an
Right.
educator.
Right. That's beautiful. What was one of your soul's conquest, and what is shaping up to be your current soul's conquest?
Mm, great question. Soul's conquest. I think my greatest soul's conquest is my ability to iterate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Constantly. I've had so many businesses. I've had so many businesses.
Yeah.
And I get frustrated thinking like, oh my God, here we go again. Now I have to launch another business. But you
Mm-hmm.
get better and better and better at it.
Yeah.
And I've done so many businesses, and here we are in another business and I'm back at it again.
Mm-hmm.
So, my soul's conquest, I think, was really to overcome that fear that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it or this is the wrong thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
to overcome that fear uh, perpetually and
Yeah.
to continue to deliver, awesome fucking work and to continue to execute. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
that's it.
amazing. Wow. What is the one thing that has happened recently in your life that has created an impact on how you live?
Something in my life that has created an impact on how I live.
Yes, recently something that has happened.
Mm, I'm going to talk about the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
You know, it was a huge pivot point for me. At the start of the pandemic, I was in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I was um I was thinking about ending my career in the work that I was doing, and I was thinking about going and just working for an agency and just getting a 9 to 5 and just getting a salary,
Mm-hmm.
just being one of those, 6-figure schmucks that,
Yes.
you know, that sits there and just gives up on their dreams and just like, okay, I'm going to do what's safe and builds a family.
Yeah.
And I broke out of that, and I started investing in a community, and I started educating,
Mm-hmm.
and I made the leap, I made the jump, and I'm a year in now, and it's been a remarkable journey. um, and the pandemic has really taught me a whole lot about who I am and who my friends are and the people around me, and the world that we want to live in, and what the next step in my career is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's definitely the pandemic.
Wow. Amazing. One last question. What is the one last thing that you would like to leave my listeners with?
One last thing. Ooh, okay.
Mhm.
I'll say this. One of my big goals in my life was to peek behind the curtain of Oz, so to speak.
Mhm.
To see what the big brands look like when they're building their products, to see what Nike looks like when they're developing their shoes,
Yeah.
to see what Tesla looks like when they're designing their cars and launching their cars, to see what SpaceX looks like when they're building their rocket ships,
Yeah.
to see what Facebook looks like, what Twitter looks like,
Mhm.
um, Sony. I've had the distinct advantage of being able to look behind the scenes and seeing how these companies are built and seeing how they operate.
Mhm.
And the truth of the matter is, there is no like special education that has helped them, help these companies grow, to help design these products. There's nothing like unique out there. There's no special formula that's hidden.
Mhm.
It's all super, super accessible. And what I've come to understand is, for us to build businesses that can compete with the Facebooks and the Nikes and the Sonys of the world, with the Teslas and the Model X's of the world, uh, we don't need to be, some huge company with a ton of VC money behind us. So we can start right in our own communities. You can start right in your rooms. You can start on, the 3-year-old Android phone that you have.
Mhm.
Like the tools, technology for us as creatives to build the most fantastic, products and services out there, to build the most powerful companies, to revolutionize the way that we live our world. The tools are there now, and
Yeah.
you don't need anything special. You
Wow.
just need the belief. You need to have uh, the trust in your creative,
Yeah.
the faith in your love for community and this vision, and the belief that anything is achievable. You know,
Yeah.
the software that we're on, the mic that I'm speaking on, the product that changed my hair color, the glasses that I'm wearing,
Yeah.
the language that we're speaking,
Yes.
the internet protocols that is sharing this data back and forth between ourselves.
Mhm.
Like, all of these things at some point or another were just an idea, just
Yeah.
an image in somebody's head. And each of us can take these ideas and pull them out of our head and bring it into this material world and build these fantastical things. And I don't want for you to think that anybody else out there can do it better than you. So yeah.
That was beautiful. This was a beautiful conversation. Oh my God. Seriously, it's been so enlightening. I don't think I can sleep for the rest of the night because I'll be thinking back to the things that we discussed here, and I'll be like, that was actually so beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your thoughts, your journey, your obstacles, and all the things that you did to reach where you are right now.
Thank you so much, Madhurima.
Yes.
You're incredible. I'm honored to be on your podcast. I'm so excited for the growth that lays in front of you.
Yay.
The future's incredibly bright, and I'm
Thank
glad that you're part of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you genuinely so much for joining me today.
No problem. Yeah. Take care.
You too.
All righty.
Yes.
Peace.
Peace.